All right, hi guys, this is Mr. Wilder, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the 7 principles of the Constitution. The first principle is called popular sovereignty. This is the idea that popular sovereignty is whoever gives the government its power, and in this case, the Constitution says in our country it rests with the idea of popular sovereignty, and this is a government in which the people rule. So the people are who give the government the power in the United States. The second principle is called republicanism, and this has nothing to do with the Republican Party, but it does have to do with how are people's views represented in government. And this idea of republicanism is based on this belief that people exercise their power by voting for their political representatives. An example is when we vote for the president, like Barack Obama, or any local town office, mayor, things like that in Council Bluffs. All those things are part of republicanism, and it's just the idea of voting for people to represent you. The third principle of the Constitution is federalism, and federalism is something we've talked a little bit about in class, but it's the idea that it answers the question of how power is going to be shared in the government. And in this case, the framers of our Constitution wanted the states and the nation to become partners in governing. So they wanted to have both the states and the nation to have a role in how we're going to be governed. To kind of build this cooperation together, the framers turned to the concept of federalism. And federalism is a system of government in which power is divided between the central government, in our case, the US government, and then the states, like Iowa's government. And if you look over at the chart over here, it kind of shows you which powers are delegated to the national government according to our Constitution, which powers are actually reserved for the state, and then the powers that they share. And if you look at the ones they share, they include raising taxes, providing for the public welfare, criminal justice, like we have local laws, state laws, and also federal laws, borrowing money, chartering banks, and building roads. All right, the next principle of the Constitution is separation of powers, and this answers the question, how is power divided? And the framers were concerned that too much power might fall into the hands of a single group. To avoid this problem, they built the idea of separation of powers into the Constitution. So again, if you look at the chart over here, you can see we're broken up into 3 branches in our federal government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch. And it explains to you what parts of our government are parts of those different branches. So in the legislative branch, you have the House of Representatives and the Senate. In the executive branch, you have the President and the Vice President. And of course, in the judicial branch, you have the Supreme Court. Another principle of our Constitution is this concept of checks and balances. And this answers the question, how is power evenly distributed? Remember, our framers didn't want to have any one part of our government having more power over the other. Similar to the idea we didn't want to have a king in charge of our country. So the framers made sure that each branch of the government, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch, all could exercise checks over the other branches. And checks meaning there were things they could do to stop the other branch from doing different things that they thought were unconstitutional or wrong. Next principle of the Constitution was limited government. Limited government answers the question, how is the abuse of power prevented? And the framers restricted the power of the government in the American government for everyone's citizens and powerful leaders alike. So limited government meant that the citizens have limited power, but also the leaders have limited powers too, and everyone has to obey the law. An example of this idea of limited government was in 1972. We had the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters by members of Richard Nixon's administration. Eventually, the trail of suspicion led all the way back to the president, Nixon, and he was forced to resign. Otherwise, he probably would have been impeached. Finally, we have the principle of individual rights. And this answers the question, how are personal freedoms protected? In our Constitution, we only have to look to the Bill of Rights to figure that out. And the Bill of Rights guarantees certain individual rights or personal liberties and privileges. For example, the government cannot control what people write or say. according to the Article 1 in the Bill of Rights. All right, well, that wraps it up for Principles of the Constitution. I hope this was helpful for you. Make sure you answer the questions that go along with this PowerPoint, and feel free to stop the video or review the video if you can't find some of the answers. Thanks again for watching.